a lot of the crowd looked stunned. Some went down immediately to protect themselves or their family, cover their family members. President Trump, 1 second it took him to go down. Is that part of the training when you have a president, by the Secret Service? Like, you hear gunshots, because I don't know if it's human instinct as soon as you hear it to drop down as quickly as he did.
Yeah, if you actually listen closely, Megyn, you can hear the agents as they're responding to cover him, yelling at him to get down. And the reason why they're telling him to get down is because there's armor there on that stage behind that stars and stripes pipe and drape. So they want him to immediately get behind that and then pile their bodies on top of his to give him the protection. That's that inner ring of the concentric rings of security that you were talking about. That's the last line of defense for the Secret Service. They trained for a whole host of scenarios, including the worst case scenario that we saw yesterday, the attempted assassination. So there's a lot of training there, but the work of the Secret Service, the efforts are put in on the front end, which is why we send agents out to do protective advance of sites prior to any protectees going there. That is to be on the proactive side and to identify and mitigate threats like the building that the shooter ultimately got on top of. The Secret Service is responsible for creating the overall security plan. So whether we're talking about the inner, the middle, or the outer ring of security, they own that. They are responsible for coordinating that. They are responsible for working closely with state and local law enforcement who are supporting them to make sure that the plans are implemented effectively. And
so
that
what you're saying, Chuck, is that
if
this outer perimeter was where the rooftop was, and we know that that's the case, the Secret Service doesn't get a pass by saying, well, that was outside the perimeter and we handed that over to local Pennsylvania state troopers or local law enforcement. They're also responsible for that too.
That's exactly right, especially since that building is naturally going to come up to the attention of the counter snipers. So it's going to fall within the security plan, and only being, 125 yards away with a direct line of sight to the stage. That's just outside that middle ring of security. So absolutely, you're going to have your attention drawn to it as an agent, as you're standing on the stage where the president's going to stand, and you look out and you see that elevated threat there. So you've got to go out as an agent and make sure that in your overall security plan, you are drawing attention to that building, to local police, and making sure that you are helping them implement a plan to post that building, to secure it, to put somebody on the roof, whatever way you need to do it. You need to make sure nobody had access to that building. And that's where we see the fail. Anytime you see agents having to respond the way they did within that inner circle, that means something failed in the overall security plan and failed catastrophically.
Which we, of course, saw with our own eyes. So what of these reports, Chuck, that, we showed the video earlier of all of the people, the civilians on the ground saying, he's right there. You can tell it's not a sharpshooter. He's got, tan shirt and white pants, or maybe it's the reverse. He keeps moving his body to readjust, like he's getting comfortable. I mean, you can just tell. Even I, as a layperson, can see this is not a security official. And these lay people themselves were very clued in to this guy did not belong up there and appeared to be a threat. Maybe they saw the rifle. It's just you don't hear them say that during the clip, if I recall correctly. So what of this report that they were the ones who saw, my God, the guy's up there? And then I don't know if local law enforcement heard them say that, or local law enforcement was already on it. They certainly didn't appear to be already on it. And that they went up there and this guy turned his rifle on them and the guy went back down the ladder and then started shooting. Maybe I've watched too much TV, but in my head as this plays out, of course, it shouldn't have been allowed in the first place. But once you're up there as a cop and you see a guy with an AR-15, you don't go back down the ladder. But tell me what's real.
Yeah, look, the threat should have been engaged right there. I'm convinced the shooter was on a suicide mission as he was making his way to the building. If he had been confronted by law enforcement, the shooting would have started between him and the law enforcement officers. I think the fact that he made it to the roof and was spotted by a police officer up that ladder and no action was taken is really dereliction of duty if true. But the reporting of a suspicious person with a weapon started much sooner. So it tells me that amongst the investigation, we're going to find that there was a significant gap in communication, because if the president's detail had known that there was a suspect armed who could not be found by local law enforcement within the area, then you would not bring the former president to the stage. You would actually keep him in the armored car until the situation was resolved. So it tells me there's a communication breakdown. But as far as the investigations that are going to come out of this, Megyn, I can tell you it's going to expand well beyond just what happened at that site. You're going to see people looking at the HR hiring practices of the Secret Service. You're going to see them looking at training. You're going to look at them looking at operations and resourcing. Was the former President Trump detail given all the resources that they needed to match the threat level? They're really going to be under the microscope, and there's no way to sugarcoat it. They've got a very, very rough road ahead, and rightfully so.
All those questions we're going to get into here. And yes, I agree. I mean, just on what we've heard so far, there are real questions about whether he was adequately staffed. And let's just be honest about 5'5" women standing in front of a 6'3" man as his protector. It's absurd. It's not a question of sexism. My God, this is a joke. You don't put a 5'5" woman in front of a 6'3" man as his protector. The headshot was right there. Had there been another shooter, it would have been easy to take him out. I mean, the circle around President Trump was exposed. It had a massive flaw in it. This is later when they were getting him into the car. And here's the one woman who can't reholster her weapon. Again, I hate to be so critical because I can't holster a weapon, but I am not working as Secret Service. Let me just bring in John, because you're a former sniper. And John, all credit to the sniper for taking out the shooter quickly. I mean, I'm sure this is not an easy thing to do, but a lot of people are wondering, like, if you're the sniper, I guess he would be called a counter sniper, the guy up there, working on behalf of the good guys. Why wouldn't that guy have noticed another man on a rooftop 150 yards away, not even? Like, does he have an obligation to do something before and to notice this before shooting starts?
We can answer all of that pretty easily by applying rational knowledge about how these public venue operations are carried out. Right now, what's going on is there are two prevailing narratives, not even 72 hours after the failure at the event. And these two narratives are very destructive to the country. One is that the factory building about 125 yards from the venue podium where President Trump was speaking, that building was somehow outside the security perimeter. And we can deconstruct that. That's absolutely false. The other narrative that is still prevailing is that the reason there's some perceived delay in the counter sniper successfully engaging the shooter is that there was some order from Secret Service at a higher level to not shoot, or that there are policies or procedures in place that keep them from responding to a threat unless they receive permission. And both of those narratives that are still persisting are very harmful to the country. The answers behind why those things aren't true may not necessarily be complementary to the local law enforcement involved, but it's way less damaging than letting the country believe that any of those things that happened were purposeful or purposeful negligence, because that is absolutely not what happened.
Yes, because just to add to that, there was a report from a woman named Susan Crabtree. She's the White House and national political correspondent for Real Clear Politics. And she, citing a source in the Secret Service community, has reported quite a few things. And one of them is that it is not protocol for Secret Service to shoot until after the target has shot first. And then NBC News came out this morning and reported as follows. The roof, this is again citing a Secret Service, I believe, source. They say this roof was a well-known high-priority vulnerability. It had been identified a day before during a security walkthrough. The counter sniper team, 2 people, were on site, and they said counter snipers do not need permission to shoot prior to engaging a suspect, and said protocols here were not followed. Now, I don't know what that means, but what do you take away from that, John?
Rules for use of deadly physical force never require a threat to fire first before returning force to end that threat. That simply does not exist. That's completely false. I don't want to speak about specific policies or procedures of any agency, but I mean, is a general principle, rules for use of deadly physical force is that a threat is evident, that they have the intent, the means, and the opportunity to present that kind of deadly threat, and a person who's not supposed to be where they're observed with a weapon. And of course, as a lawyer yourself, you understand what it means to evince a deadly intent. That requires no level of authorization at any higher level.
So what does that mean, John? Does that mean this sniper didn't see him? Like, I got to imagine you're a Secret Service sniper. You're up there. You see this guy with an AR-15, not in any sort of law enforcement gear, and presumably you know where your fellow law enforcement officers are stationed on nearby roofs, and you don't, it has to mean he didn't see him, doesn't it? Unless he just misunderstood the threat.
I will provide you what is likely the explanation for the events that we saw. Having spent 20 years working with law enforcement, special operations snipers, and public venue support for SWAT, I can tell you what is most likely what happened. Part of this starts with the fact, believe it or not, that Secret Service is such a professional organization that demonstrates such a high level of respect for local agencies that they work with. So it's very uncommon for Secret Service to work with a local SWAT counter snipers and micromanage them or over-instruct them. Right? Most likely what happened is they said, okay, that factory building, you local sniper, counter sniper team are going to occupy, secure, and take that building as your overwatch position as part of the operational plan. Check. What they are unlikely to say is, hey guys, you're going to observe from the roof, right? You're not going to go inside the building and try and observe and control the scene, right? You're not going to set up an area where you have dead space where you can't visually access your area of responsibility, right? I mean, we know it's a hot day, but you're not going to do that, right? I mean, Secret Service, they're the highest level of professionals, just like about all of the federal agencies I've ever worked with. And they don't go into a local scene and micromanage like that. So it's what we call, there's a lot of implied tasks and implied competence working with the local agencies.
Do you ever think, how can I work this hard and still be in debt? The piles of overdue bills, the threatening phone calls, never having money to do anything. If you are trapped in debt, Done with Debt can be a way out. They have developed aggressive new strategies to end your debt permanently. Done with Debt stands between you and the harassing, annoying bill collectors. Who wants to deal with them? They tirelessly negotiate with your creditors to lower or even forgive what you may owe. And they do it all without bankruptcy or new loans. One client said one phone call saved us a fortune. I only wish we'd done this long ago. Done with Debt has unique strategies to get you out of debt faster and put more money in your pocket every month. But you need to hurry because some debt solutions are time sensitive and you don't want to miss out. Visit donewithdebt.com. Talk with one of their debt relief strategists for free. What do you have to lose except your debt? Go to donewithdebt.com. That's donewithdebt.com. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.